Recently, I put out a guide to all the factions in Age of Sigmar in 24 minutes, and you might have watched that and thought to yourself, wow, there are so many different armies that I can pick from in Age of Sigmar. And you'd be right, but it's a very difficult decision to make given how many choices that you have, and that it will be a very big financial investment to get an army all the way to up and running at 2K points. In this video, I'm going to share some tips and tricks to help you pick your faction so that you can get started on your Age of Sigmar journey. And later on in the video, I'm going to share what I think is the single most important piece of advice for picking a faction. So let's get into it. The first thing that I recommend anyone do if they're going to be getting into Warhammer is to look at the entire range of models for the faction that they are interested in. And at that point, you can ask yourself some questions. So, do you like the overall aesthetic that you're seeing with these models when you look at a wide range of cavalry, infantry, the ranged units, the monsters, the heroes, etc.? And is the range of models big enough? You might ask yourself, well, look at Fire Slayers, for an example. There's not that many models, so that is going to reduce your army list choice when you actually get into playing the game, and that might be a big factor for you as well. If you've already mapped out that you're going to be buying a spearhead for a given faction, when you look at the whole range, can you see what your next few purchases might be? For example, when I bought the Lumineth Vanguard, I thought to myself, or sorry, the Lumineth Spearhead it's called now, well, I want to get the Dawn Riders next because they look so freaking cool with their lances. I also thought to myself, well, I would love to get the Light of Eltharion. I would love to get one of those like Ballista, even if they weren't good at the time. I was just like, they look really cool. There's a couple of elves with this giant bow that is like a siege weapon. Let's get that. And that made it really easy for me to kind of map out my future of where I was going to go in the faction. And if you can't do that, then it's probably not the faction for you. And since we mentioned the Spearhead box, you have to ask yourself, do you like the boxed set? If you buy a box set for the faction that you're interested in, it's going to come with some preset models that are in there, and you have to like all of those. If you think to yourself, well, I don't want to even play with those, you know, you're not going to have a choice, at least at first. Maybe the rest of the box set is really good and it's going to be okay because eventually you won't even play with that model that you don't like. But at first, you are going to have to use kind of what you get in your box set. And yes, you're going to want to buy a box set because the savings are just insane. It's too good a deal not to get into the game that way, especially since the Spearhead mode is going to be such an easy way for new players to start playing as soon as they possibly can. Next up, when you're looking into a faction, is the lore. It's really important to look into the lore of the faction that you're interested in. And my guide to all the factions included little bite-sized bits of lore about those factions. So that's a good place to start. But you can also go check out some other sources of lore on YouTube. So for example, Sigmar's Lore Keeper is a pretty new channel that is delivering really awesome lore videos that are also really funny. And so it makes it easy to watch a big lore video because there's some humor in there as well. And there's also the staple, the legend, 2+ Tough has been making lore videos forever, and they're just really great. So you can go check that out. And he already has lore on literally everything that you're going to watch. Now, the reason that you're going to want to do this is because having a connection to the lore makes everything better. When you're building your models and you figure out which loadout you're going to put on, it might be connected to a Black Library book that you've read or a specific sub-faction that you're interested in. You know, maybe you're going to be painting up an army and you know exactly what colors you're going to use because you've read that lore, you know what colors that cool faction uses. So you might choose a very specific paint scheme because it represents the sub-faction and the army that you thought was the most cool that you read about. So for example, maybe you read the Callous and Toll Cities of Secrets book and you thought, okay, well, I'm playing the Stormcast Eternals. I got the Scaventide box, and the Knights Excelsior were really epic when they came in with their white armor and they were just slaughtering Tzeentch people all over the place. So you decide to paint white armor and blue shields on all of your Stormcast. Another reason why this is really important is because of narrative play. So while many Age of Sigmar players will play matched play battles, a lot of other people will have some sort of narrative campaign they've set up, like Path to Glory that's in the core book, or whatever it is you've decided on your own, a scenario. And even if you're playing matched play, you might go into matches saying, well, hey, I'm from Hammerhall Aksha. That's what my paint job is set up to look like. And you know, I'm playing this matched play battle, but I know that my guys are they're marching out from Hammerhall, and we're in actually like whatever it is, and you kind of build up that lore around your army, and it makes it more impactful. It makes it more fun, especially when you have named characters that are actually gracing the battlefield on your side. Like that's really impactful. Another example could be perhaps your Tzeentch cult looking to overthrow a specific city on the order, you know, of order, and or maybe you're a Dawnbringer crusade that's setting out from a city like I mentioned. But whatever it is, you can build up a story about your faction, and it can be whatever it is that you want, but it's going to make it more meaningful and more exciting when you finally see those models on the table moving around. It's gonna be special. Tip number 3 is going to be about playstyle, because you might like the way that the models look, you might like the lore behind them, but then you find out that the playstyle of the actual army is not going to be your specific, you know, style, something that you like to do when you play board games, tabletop games, or even just like a video game, whatever it is. So search around for existing advice that's already online, and this is you know, this is great, because the best part is people have asked these questions for years and years and years, and the kind of the archetypes of armies haven't really changed. Even if we have a new edition, there's still, you know, a shooting army like the Caradron Overlords is still going to be a shooting army. So you can kind of learn about those things. You can find out what people think about your faction, specifically the playstyle, like I said, but anything else that they might say, like maybe they're going to tell you that Lumineth Realm Lords are not fun to play against, or they used to be in 3rd edition. That's what I found out when I started Warhammer. I bought my Lumineth box, I went online, and then I found out a few things. I found out people didn't like them. I found out they were very, very magic focused in the meta. Now, that's not how you had to build them, but that was a big focus of the Lumineth, and that kind of scared me off, because I kind of wanted to be high elves running into battle and just being in the thick of things, you know, fighting it out in this, you know, awesome war. And so I was a little bit down about that, but now that I've learned more about the game, I'm actually more excited to try out some of the magic stuff as well. But they've made in the 4th edition the Venari kind of regiment, where you can have your more martial elves. They make that more of a focus for the Lumineth. They can be a little bit stronger in that melee, and you can play different styles, right? But I wouldn't have known that unless I did my research. I think the key thing here is just to do a little bit of research to find out about the playstyle, because you're going to sink a lot of money into these things that you can't go and spend a bunch of money and then be really bummed about the gameplay. So another example could be the Orc war clans, because the models are badass, and orcs are a standard across all fantasy games and genres, or like, you know, whatever medium it is, orcs are really popular. And orcs in Warhammer typically are getting forward and into melee range really quickly. They're very aggressive, and that's important that you know that they are primarily a combat focused army. Now, the Cruel Boys are a little bit more sneaky than the Iron Jaws. They have some magic and whatever, but it's still going to be a combat focused army. There's no way around that. And if that's not what you're into, then that might be a deal breaker for you. Although I think they look really cool and they play really cool. So I promise you, if you go on Google and you put in like Age of Sigmar, which army should I pick? You put in Age of Sigmar, you know, should I pick the Stormcast Eternals? Should I pick Tzeentch? Whatever it is, you will find multiple threads of people on Reddit already talking about it. Someone going on and on and on about their faction and what they'd like and what they don't like, and so on. That information's already out there. You just got to go find it. The final tip, and this is the tip that I think is the single most important thing that you need to know about picking your faction for Warhammer. It's the rule of cool. So at the end of the day, the rule of cool always wins out. If you really like something and you want to build it and paint it and play it, you get it. That's just it. End of story. Okay. This is just the most important part of picking a faction, is that you think it's cool, and what you put on the table doesn't have to be meta or the strongest or whatever. It just has to be cool. It has to bring you joy. That's what's important. And that's what's going to bring you the most enjoyment out of the game. Now, I do think you should take the advice of what you read from people online with a little bit of caution. And the reason is that people are going to give you the most information they can so that you have something to work with. And sometimes their own biases are going to show in that. It's going to work their way into the mix. And at the end of the day, if your heart's set on something and someone said like, oh, you know, you won't want to play that, or, you know, this is the way to go, this is the box to get, and it's just not lining up with what you really thought you wanted to do, then don't listen to that advice. Even if, you know, they mean well, it's fine. That's not the point. The point is that you're doing the thing that you thought was cool and that you're prepared to do, and that's going to bring you a lot of fun. Now, the only exception to the rule of cool is there's one very specific exception, and that is if a faction is like literally about to lose models or get a total refresh. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. When I started Warhammer, I actually didn't want to buy the Lumineth box. I wanted to buy the Cities of Sigmar box. And I went online, and literally everybody and their mom was saying that Cities of Sigmar was going to get a refresh. It was completely filled with like Warhammer fantasy battle models, and it still is to like a certain degree, and that they just knew that, like, you know, within a few months this new box is going to come out, they were going to get a refresh and so on. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to buy all the old stuff and then be really bummed when I've spent my budget and I can't get the new stuff. And so I got the Lumineth. They were my second choice. And a few months later, the city's new models came out, and oh boy, they were really, really cool. Like some of the best sculpts ever, and really fun rules to boot. So it was worth waiting in that scenario, even though I thought Cities of Sigmar, the average Joe, I thought that was the coolest. That was the coolest thing. Well, guess what? I'm still playing Cities of Sigmar, but I also have some cool elves as well. So it kind of worked out. So do a little bit of research. You can ask me, you can pop on the Discord, you can go on the Reddit. They have a help thread that you can ask as well, whatever it is, just to make sure there's not something coming out you know, in your faction that you're going to be regretting that you didn't get, but otherwise, rule of cool all the way. Okay, that's going to be it for my advice, and I'm sure that there's going to be some experienced players that have watched this video that want to share some other tips for picking factions. So I encourage you, if you're one of those players, to share that information in the comments. And if you're a new player, I'm really curious about what you're leaning towards. Are you going to get the Skaven Tide box because it's just purely the best value at the start of a new edition to get the rule book and the spearhead stuff and 2 forces and bring your friend into it and so on? Or are you just going to be following your heart and picking a faction that you really enjoy? Feel free to share that information. I'm really excited to read it in the comments. And otherwise, I'm going to see you all in another video. One last thing, if you want to join us on Discord and talk about Warhammer, then please do. The link for that is in the description. Otherwise, we'll see you all again in the video soon enough.